next speaker is Ian Bongo Ayan. I hope I pronounced it right, Ian, but I know you will correct me if not. Ian Bongo Ayan Maura was family born to Beverly and Valentine Maura. He's the father of 4 children. Ian, you got to pronounce those names because only thing I could pronounce Ashanti and Diallo. Education, he went to one of the best schools in the Bahamas. For my Caribbean folks, we say there are only 2 set of people, those who went to the school and those who wish they went to the school. I know y'all don't throw rocks at me, okay? St. Augustine's College, SAC, in 1994, where he served as student council president in 1994. He attended the College of the Bahamas. He was a social science senator in Cobus, 1996. And he received a Associate of Arts degree in history. University of the West Indies, Cable of Barbados, president of Student Guild, 2000, bachelor's in history and political science with honors. College of the Bahamas, certificate of education in 2006. Ian has a wealth of knowledge in civic organization, from volunteering at the Ranfully Home, volunteer board of directors for the Grants Town after school program, evolved into the Indaba project, local NGOs. He's vice chairman of the House of Rastafari, also Alan Stewart's camp. Actually, he was vice chairman from 2012 to 2017. And from 2014 to 2016, Spelman College Independent Scholar. From 2014 to present, National Repatriations Committee. 2016 to present, Genesis Jonkanu, Director of Outreach. His employment span as an entrepreneur from 2000 to 2006, downtown Straw Market. Currently, he's a teacher at Program Shore. He's an entrepreneur with Ubuntu percussion band, entrepreneur with Edible Landscapes. He has numerous speaking engagements with Rotary of New Providence, Rotary of Old Fort Bay, Critical Caribbean Symposium, with University of the Bahamas, Utilities Regulations and Competition Authority, as well as Ministry of Tourism. So let us put our virtual hands together and let us welcome our brother, Ian Bongo I Maura.
Morning. Thank you. And that I want to meet that person too, who you was talking about. I had to make sure that was me. But yeah, thanks, and I'm really happy to be a part of this morning. So this morning we are focused on the topic breaking the silos. And silos, I guess these individualistic columns that can be used for grain storage, but the focus here is I guess, individualism. And what I bring to the table is Ubuntu, the topic of Ubuntu. And my focus will be on a collaborative approach to healing. So to kind of connect with the presentation that came before me, I'd like to start with 2 scenarios, 2 short anecdotes. So there are two stories I'd like to share. The first one is a young man, his name is Harry. Harry grew up in Crooked Island Street with both parents in the home. Harry grew up, he wasn't that interested in education. Eventually graduated from school, hanging out with friends in the community. Harry eventually got arrested for armed robbery. His mother intervened and asked a gentleman who had an upholstery store to bail him out and help her son out of this jam. Fortunately, the man agreed and he bailed the young man out, and him and his friends, as a matter of fact. The young man, Harry, decided that he would go back to the man just to repay him for what he had done for him. His friends didn't go. And it was there that he picked up the trade of upholstery. Now Harry has his own business and is looking to do the same for others. That's one story. Then we have another young man, and these are not real names. Eh? Then we have another young man. Let's call him Johnny. Johnny was in program after program, and nothing really seemed to work. Johnny did not have the support at home to help him get through the struggles, even though he kept getting into problems. Johnny right now is a street walker. I see him all the time. He's a street walker. And I try to reach out to him and talk to him, but he's a street walker. The difference between the two of them is that one had support and one did not have support. And this is the reality that we're facing in our country. We're moving from one stage of development where we were basically a village, and we know what happens in the village. The village raises the children. Now we're moving into more an urban center, and urban centers are more about individualism. Let me get what I could get. And so therefore the safety nets of a village have gone away from us. And we're starting to see a lot more problems as a result of these safety nets moving away from us. But the solution to that is to reverse that individualism and replace it with a community-focused perspective. And that is where Ubuntu comes in. What is Ubuntu? Ubuntu is a 2,000-year-old philosophy. As a matter of fact, it's older than 2,000 years old. So you know that it is something that has value if it has lasted for that long. We just knowing about it now again, but it's something that's been around for over 2,000 years. And it simply means, I am because we are. Everyone, indulge me and just repeat that with me. I am because we are. I know I can't hear you, but that's all right. Just say it in your space. I good with that, I'll trust you to do that because I am because we are. So I can trust you to participate with me in this exercise. So the meaning of Ubuntu simply, I am because we are. And it operates on the philosophy that my humanity is determined by my relationship with others. Everything that I do has an impact, whether it's good or bad. It has an impact, not just on my life, not just on the people who I do it to, but it impacts my family, it impacts my friends, it impacts our society. So if we're operating on this type of philosophy, it makes it harder for us to commit offenses because we realize that what I do has an impact not just on me, but around me. Everyone knows energy, right? Everyone is familiar with energy and how energy works. Usually when we think of energy, we're thinking about electricity, but energy also comes from humans. Think about it, and especially the police. Oftentimes, an individual might make you feel suspicious. They give you a particular energy. They might not even move, but just the energy that they're giving you makes you feel suspicious. So energy is transferred from one person to the next without it being even verbal, without touch, without anything. And so therefore, if we know that's possible, sometimes you walk into a building and just because a person say good morning, the type of good morning that they give you gives you a particular type of energy. If they mumble and say, morning, they ain't excited about seeing you. But if they give you a nice, cheerful, good morning, that's a different type of energy. And so that energy, we notice it more when it's verbal, but we give that energy off. We're perpetually giving off that energy. With Ubuntu, what we're doing is being more focused about the energy that we're giving off in everything that we do. because even though it's an old traditional African philosophy, it has gained ground in today's world. Ubuntu in action. Ubuntu was first made popular in South Africa after apartheid. And most of us should know about apartheid and the hurt and pain that went through that. In order for the country not to fall apart, they had to form a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. And the focus of that was to bring justice to the victims, but also preserve the humanity of the offender. It wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about revenge, because what that would do is bring down the country of South Africa altogether. They didn't want to go backwards. They wanted to move forward while addressing the major hurt that apartheid had caused. So the purpose of that whole Truth and Reconciliation Commission was reconciliation, as the name says. And reconciliation means bringing together all of those parties who are affected by the injustice and mapping a way forward. This is very different from punitive type of thinking, where we just wish to punish people. This thinking is more regards to restorative justice. Restorative justice, I'm sure many of you would have heard that because it's getting so popular now. But restorative justice involves thinking a particular way. And the essence of restorative justice is Ubuntu. Even though you have committed an offense against me, how I treat you determines my humanity. See, my humanity is not just determined about when it's a good time and everything good. No, who I am as a human is determined by when the pressure is hot, when I'm mad, when I ain't got a plan, when somebody do something that throw me off. How will I address this matter? Do I address this in a way where I just feel like, okay, I angry, you do something to me, so I have a chance for revenge? Or do I think about, okay, how do I want to treat you the way that I would like to be treated? Restorative justice is an official practice, an official way of looking and mechanisms of addressing wrongs with the concept of bringing the community together and helping the community grow. Now, what we find is that in the Bahamas, the issues that we are faced with, a lot of times, you might wonder, how can we bring that reconciliation into play? How can we bring this spirit of Ubuntu into play? Well, let me tell you, if they could do it in South Africa, if they could do it in South Africa, where they were born into injustice, where there was nobody who had their back, there was like just so much cruelty being given out. If they could do that there, then we can do it here. So let's talk more about this restorative justice. Restorative justice is simply a process for resolving crime. I would argue that what we're doing now is pretty much responding to crime, but there's no resolution. And so what we find, and no disrespect to the agencies involved with addressing crime, but what we honestly have been doing and watching is that the numbers keep going up. The numbers keep going up. And even though it might be a decrease from year to year, when we look from decade to decade, from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s to now, relatively, we're seeing that there's an increase in that crime and those who are getting involved in criminality. A part of that is because we're not really resolving the issues. We're looking at one side of it, but we're not looking at the whole picture. Through restorative justice, we get to focus on three areas. The first area is redressing the harm that's done to victims. Right now, as it stands, someone murders my daughter. She was my all. That person gets locked up and they go to prison. That does very little for me as an individual in terms of redressing. What can happen and what we're seeing happening here at Program Shore is that someone is killed. They have a son, and because that wrong was not addressed, there was no redress for that young man. He grows up with a chip on his shoulder saying that not let me not be like my father so that I can avoid the same outcome. Rather, he starts to think about, okay, how I could actually be smarter than my daddy and be more aggressive than my daddy. And you often hear, I ain't gonna let these niggas catch me slipping. If we have a process in place that allows for the redressing of the harm that's done to victims, then we have a better position, or be in a better position to reduce that, what do you say, effect where one incident might mushroom into many other incidents. So with restorative justice, we first start off with redressing the harm that is done to others. The next part of it is holding the offenders accountable. Now, I know when I say Ubuntu and I am because we are, that implies like some sort of like kumbaya type moment, you know, kumbaya, everybody singing and clapping with their hands. And yes, that is a part of it if we've done it successfully. But that does not mean that if you have done a wrong against community, that you have done a wrong against an individual, that you shouldn't be held accountable. But you're holding you accountable should not be the only aspect of justice. Whatever we do to hold you accountable should factor in how do you perform redress for those that you have victimized. So holding the offenders accountable is very important in this whole dynamic. And then a third aspect of it is engaging the community. We're beginning to do this now, and I'll talk about that more a little bit later. But engaging the community has been a missing part of the formula, but it is increasingly becoming important for the community to play a role, whether that be the church or NGOs or even just a business, you know, whomever is a part of the community has a role to play in addressing the concerns of that community. You know, recently AID made a big stink about being unable to find people to pass their literacy and numeracy tests. And many people believe, okay, um, you know, that's we just joined the bandwagon. Yeah, Bahamians is a problem with our education. Da, 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 da. But for me as an educator, my first question was, well, what were the conditions of the test? You know, what's really happening there? I found it suspicious that that would make the news, right? And so I made a post about it on Facebook. And I was surprised to see that so many people responded by saying, you know, businesses don't have a responsibility to help the community. But to me, that didn't make any sense. Because if you're saying that you need people to perform at a high level and you can't find them, doesn't that affect your bottom line in your company if your people can't perform at the highest level of efficiency? So therefore, if you can't find them, doesn't it make sense to adopt some sort of civic responsibility and say, how can I address this issue of literacy and numeracy so that I could make more money? But because the businesses are operating in a silo, they don't see the role that education or poor performance in education plays on their actual bottom line. And the more we move out of our silos, the more we get ourselves involved in playing a part in addressing the problems that we have, the more we see that we get greater success. And so engaging the community, holding offenders accountable, and getting redress for the victims. Notice these are all the stakeholders. You have the victim, you have the offender, and you have the community. When we bring all of those together, we find that we could transform the relationship between the community and the justice system as a whole. Another thing that we love to complain about is, oh, the community is not helping us. They know who do this and they know who do that. And believe me, they do. They do. They talk about it. You know, even students here, you sit and you listen to them and they could tell you who do this and who do that and who do the next thing and how this happened. Half the time I think they be lying. But in any event, they're sharing information. But if a police officer were to come in, they would shut right down. There's a breakdown between the community and or certain communities and the police. With restorative justice and giving the community a role in the whole process, what you find is that it allows the community and the police to address their situation without directly addressing it. A lot of times we want to address a situation head on. A young man can't read, so we want to sit him down and teach him how to read. When really and truly, we have to approach the problem indirectly. So if he's 15 or 16 and he likes motorbikes, so therefore you teaching him but Johnny and the Apple Tree as a reading a guide will have less impact with him than if you teach him about motorbikes. Give him reading stories about motorbikes, about how to fix a motorbike, about what have stories that happen on motorbikes. These are things that would naturally interest him. See where the concept of Ubuntu comes in, even as far as education. If you make it about your client, if you make it about the individual, the target, and less about yourselves. A lot of time, those of us that are helping or that have the responsibilities in society, we often fall into the trap, and that's a colonial tradition, by the way, to fall into the trap of egoism, that it's my job to fix this and everything is about me, when really and truly, I am a tool of the community in helping to address the whole situation that we are part of. So therefore, when we use the spirit of Ubuntu, it allows us to open up our eyes because of my humanity, because of my concerns, because of my struggles, I am able to relate to the struggles of others more. And even when something seems hopeless, I might even be able to find hope by saying by just asking myself, how would I like myself to be treated if I were in that circumstance? And that's the basis of Ubuntu. I am because we are. So whatever we are affects who I am. And so this restorative justice allows us to transform the relationship. Just another term for it is participatory justice. When you allow people to participate in the whole process, then there's more benefits and more outcomes that will come out of it. So here we have now punitive versus restorative justice. Here's the first picture. Take a look at it and ask yourself, what image is this? What feelings, what words come to your mind when you look at this? You don't have to tell me, that's fine. Words that come to my mind is cold. Cold. The room looks cold. This is the International Criminal Court, which is in the Hague, all right? And the individuals who go there are usually from some country around the world, and they have to fly there. They have to, the victims who might be the what do you call it? The witnesses, they have to fly there. And so it's very cumbersome. When you're seeking for justice in that sort of circumstance, it moves the ability to get justice away from the people. And so you're finding that even though the International Criminal Court has power, it is doing very little it did very little to reverse the impact of abusive regimes, because it's so far removed from the victims, from even the offenders are isolated from their victims. And so it becomes more intellectual. as opposed to providing healing for those countries. Here's South Africa now. And this is one of their Truth and Reconciliation Committee meetings. Look at it and think about what words would come to your mind. Look at the first picture. You see that it's limited. Everybody kind of looks homogeneous, looks the same. If you look at the second picture, you can see Black people there, you can see white people there. You even see a man in the corner, in the top corner, wearing one little short pants. You know, there's all kinds of different people there. So it's participatory justice. In that forum, the community is healing together. And so what you find is that South Africa was able to survive that great tragedy and continue their path of development and growth without missing a beat by using this restorative justice. If we just look at the images here, we can see that one just seems to evoke more power, the energy. Remember we were talking about energy before. The energy that comes from these, one is more represents healing. Of course, the restorative justice would involve more coordination. It would involve more effort. But through putting in that work is where the growth comes. Growth doesn't just come and the benefits doesn't just come through, okay, let's do it. No, the power in all of these things come through the process. And so restore punitive justice, you can't say that's a bit of a process too, but it's more of a response. Restorative justice is more about a process. So now we come and talk more specifically about crime, criminality, and antisocial behavior. Crime, it always exists. Crime, it always exists. There will always be people who, for whatever reason, go against the law. When it becomes a problem for a nation or a group of people is when it is no longer manageable. What you find is that the lack of resources or inefficient use of the resources leads to more criminal activity. And so it becomes like a cycle. Lack of resources to address the problem causes more criminality. There are not enough police to retrieve the offenders. And so the offenders realize there's a greater chance of them getting away. And so therefore it sends a message that I can get away, and therefore more people take a chance with getting away. So the lack of resources or inefficient use of the resources. And we're gonna come back to that issue too, of efficient use of resources over time, right? So the lack of resources affects this criminality. It begins with insufficient socialization of a child. When the child is very young, they haven't been socialized to the norms of society and what it's required. And so they go to school without this foundation. And of course now, bear with me because this is not like exclusive. These are just general comments of how the process goes. It starts with the insufficient socialization, then it moves to poor performance in school. Poor performance in school leads to other issues, ego and that sort of thing. And so to redeem themselves, they get involved in antisocial behavior by time it's their adolescent. All while I was in primary school, the only attention that I got was when I behaved badly. In addition to that, I would like to cover up that I can't read or that I don't know my multiple choice tables. And so it's easy for me to get put out of, it's easier for me to get put out of class than for me to handle those who can do it laughing at me. So I get involved with antisocial behavior. So we start with before school, then we go to primary school, then we go to high school, right? And then as a result of poor performance and that antisocial behavior, you get yourself in cliques. When I'm put out of class, I don't go to the office. I go to the bathroom where the fellas are hanging out, smoking and gambling. And from there, then I get into fights and I get into these stories, and that's where the trouble finds me. And when it get to be too much for the school, then they send me to an institution like Program Sure. But by then, I already have little to no connection to both my family and my community. This disconnect is what allows me to not feel a way about offending my community and those who are in it. Definitely, I could kill somebody who in the same community as me because my life ain't worth nothing. So why is theirs worth something? So Ubuntu works not just with regards to with the people who are working to address the problem. Ubuntu is a spirit that has to be passed on even to the offender so that it could change his mindset for him to understand. Do you know I'm program sure? I've been working here now for 15 years, and I feel confident enough to say threats don't work with regards to changing behavior or affecting behavior as much as helping the person understand why the rule is important. If I want students to hurry up and go back to school, it is much easier for me to explain to them why we have the rules and how it is connected to the goal that they have of returning to school and for them to monitor their own behavior than for me to say, these are the rules, I set the rules, you are the child, I am the adult, just do what I say. You find that individuals in this environment who come with that sort of tone and that sort of energy, remember, we're coming back, energy, who come with that energy find themselves in much more conflict than someone like myself who tries to help the student understand. What you find is that once people have an understanding, a connection, if you can connect what is required of them with what they want, then people definitely motivate themselves. When the students come to me and they say, oh, this too hard, this too this, I say to them, no. If you was hungry right now and you only had no food, and you find out you only had food for days, and you find out that they get food in the office, aren't you going to try your best to see how you could get some of that food? Because you're hungry. Because you're hungry or because you're in pain, you're going to do what you have to in order to address that pain. So when it's real, you don't give yourself excuses. And so therefore, I can't give you no excuse as to why you can't do it. You just got to stand up. And what helps them to stand up and stay committed is understanding how their behavior is connected to their goals. So punitive justice, as I would have just explained, would have been like, oh, I tell them you have to do what I say do, or else. You know, that's that punishment. And you know what I find? You guys can't really notice it now, but I'm like under 6 feet tall, right? And one of the things that I first came to realize while I was here at Program Sure, I'm pretty slim, probably about 150, 160. When I put on weight, I used to be like 165, right? So there are students that are come here who like 200 pounds and like 6 feet tall, you know? Like, how am I going to intimidate them other than with a mindset? And when it come right down to it, if they reject it, then what am I going to do? Get in some sort of physical altercation with somebody who's sometimes twice my size? That doesn't make sense. And so the punitive justice only deals with one aspect of the whole situation that we're talking about. You committed an offense, so therefore, what is your punishment? Here is your punishment, and we leave it right there. What restorative justice does is look at the whole picture with a view to saving the community through reconciliation. And it requires a collaborative approach. So what we say in here now, in my context, the student doesn't follow the rules. What I am trying to do is have a community here at Program Sure. A school is a community. Every time there's a number of people, what you find is that's a community. When somebody goes astray, they've gone astray, but they're still a part of that community. I can't throw them away. what you find is in the regular school, traditional school setting, and sorry to any teachers that are here, private school get to expel you. They could that's their throwing away of people who they can't deal with. The regular school, regular public school, they can't expel you if you're not. As a matter of fact, they can't expel you at all. They can only write to the minister to ask for you to be expelled after you've reached 16. But they can't expel you. But what they do is get rid of you. They have their strategies to get rid of it. In my context, I don't have the ability to get rid of it. I have to try and see how I can work it. And if we don't work it properly, what ends up happening is that student ends up being a thorn in our side. And they affect the whole program by infecting other students because they can collaboration. The students will collaborate. It's just if we, the adults in the context, are going to collaborate also. But when we're talking about rehabilitation or even habilitating someone, because that's what has to happen sometimes, that there has to be a collaborative approach. And so you have to get even the offender to buy in to his own healing process. If you can't get him to buy in, then he will be like, they say one rotten apple spoiled the whole bunch. But I've seen that happen so many times in real life. And so you got to be like the shepherd and go after that one. You won't be able to stop all the behavior, the negative behavior in all of them. But what you would find is with buy-in, there are certain times when you could get them, just say something to them and get them to ease up or cool down on the behavior that you're trying to affect. And so when we're talking about crime, criminality, and antisocial behavior, it's all connected. One leads to the next. And so during that process, you see what I said, from the family to preschool, to primary school, to high school, to the church, to the people in the community, all of these are actually opportunities for intervention with that child. And when we miss those opportunities for intervention, just like what the lady was talking about earlier, when we miss those earlier signs of mental health disorders, then it becomes worse. It becomes harder for us to address the situation. But if we change our perspective, it's easy for us to want to do the punitive. With my own children, I had to go through this process. I'm not really a beater, but there are sometimes children just get on your nerves, and it's so easy to just swing your hand. But I had to go through a process where I realized that what you're actually doing is fighting a child when you do that. And I know plenty of people would disagree with that. But for me, that's how I saw it. My child is 5 years old and I spanking them, I hitting them. No, that wasn't good enough for me. So how now do I address the wrong that they have done so that I could get an effect, so that I could get the desired effect of them not repeating the behavior? And to this day, my mother has called me soft and with my children, but she never beat, so she had her strategy of what she used for disciplining. I'm not using hers, I'm using my own. But I'm just saying, there are different ways of dealing with things than our natural reaction. Punitive justice is our natural reaction. Restorative justice is where we get at when we use discipline and remember that even though an individual may have done something wrong, they have not lost their humanity. And in order to get them back on the right track, we must use restorative justice. We must restore humanity in their own eyes, their own humanity. You are worth more than this. I am who I am because of who you are. And so, as a country, If you ain't playing your part, no matter how much money I have, no matter what I do, as a Bahamian, I will be affected by what you do. Remember when we had Dorian and a number of our citizens tried to make it over to the United States? Remember what Trump said at that time? Um, and we were all offended, you know. And I thought maybe for Trumpism, he was a little gracious. You know, he said some of these people are known to the police. They have criminal records, and this is why he wasn't too keen on allowing people in. You know, I don't remember the full details, but that's generally the gist of it. And we were offended, but that's just another example of how the actions of some affects us all. And so we have to get people to understand how that actually works. Because a lot of the people who are carrying out these antisocial behavior, they just have no idea of the impact of the things that they're doing. They themselves are operating in a silo. And so when we use Ubuntu, the Ubuntu and that spirit of giving of myself so that you will give of yourself allows us to break through the silos like what we're doing now, the silos that the criminals are involved in, those in antisocial behavior. It allows us to break through the silos. And I'm not telling you anything that I think off the top of my head. I'm telling you, based on my experience here, being able to get students to give me information, of being able to get through to that difficult student, sharing myself, my own downfalls, my own challenges, my own experiences helps me to be able to get through to that student. But it's not about me. It's about just using my story so that I could get through that silo that they have, because what they believe, see, the silos are not created by us sometimes, you know, we just find ourselves in these silos. The students, they go to a silo based on culture and based on experience that says nobody cares. Nobody cares. I am in this by myself. So let me put up this tough wall so that nobody could come in and hurt me and see my vulnerability, right? And so we have to be able to use that spirit of Ubuntu. I am, because we are. You and I are connected. I'm not just the law officer and you are the criminal. I am the Bahamian and you are the Bahamian. And when I have to come and get you for some negative reason, what it means now is that the energy that we could have been putting towards building ourselves up is now being put towards something else. And so if we able to see how we are all interconnected. And you know, it doesn't just stop at a national level, you know. It operates in the whole world, the whole world. And so even immigration can benefit from this spirit of Ubuntu. Political leaders can benefit from this spirit of Ubuntu, because what the one tenet of Ubuntu is that the king is only as powerful as the people whom he represents. And so even in leadership, the spirit of Ubuntu can help you, because if your people who are your subordinates are not empowered to excel, then your department can't be empowered to excel, then you can be empowered to excel. And if you got your position through nepotism and favoritism, that don't really make a difference to you. But if you are truly interested in moving the country forward, then this principle of Ubuntu can even work in your department where you represent that spirit. I am as good as you all are, so I require excellence from you. I will first perform excellence for you and model what that excellence is, so I am sure you know what it is. And then I will expect it from you because this is what I am accepting. We have a choice about what we accept from people. And people will know that. That's another energy that we give, excuse me, that we give off without saying one word. We don't have to say a word. We just give off that energy that this ain't acceptable behavior. And people know that and they will act accordingly around us. That's how energy works. So once we have Ubuntu as our center, then we can move that out to others. And now we talk about community partnership. When we're talking about addressing the issues, any issue that we face, whether it be agriculture, feeding ourselves, whether it be crime, whether it be education, literacy, numeracy, whatever the issue is that we face, the healing we need cannot be achieved without the participation of stakeholders. And what does that mean? The community must be involved in the whole process. So right now, we're using the spirit of Ubuntu. We have the suspension centers, and I don't know if you guys know about this, but in education, the churches have come on board with addressing antisocial behavior. And so before a student is sent to program show, to ensure that it's a fair process for them, if this might be an incident, they might be assigned to go to a church to get some assistance, right? With regards to their behavior. And so this is the beginnings, the makings of us using that collaborative approach in order to get where we want. The schools themselves cannot handle the issue. The police, even though they would support the schools, has not been able to produce the desired results. And so those are two stakeholders. Here in now another stakeholder comes in, which is the church, and the idea was formalized through these suspension centers. But think about it. That's just the beginning aspect of it. The churches operate the suspension centers, but we also need literacy and numeracy centers. Remember what I said before? In order to address the problem, sometimes you can't go directly at it. You can't just go at the person's behavior, especially if you don't know them. I being disrespectful in class. So they send me to the church. Church people good. They pray for me. They give me a good, interesting story. They fill my belly. They tell me how much they love me and care for me. But I don't really know them at first, and I'm already suspicious of institutions, right? And so I'm not going to open up and tell you the truth. I might tell you what I think you want here so that I could get out of this. I may even open up to you. There are some people that will open up, but for the most part, when you go directly at it, it's going to take time. But what you find is when you come at it indirectly, if those same centers were to be centers for literacy and numeracy, we would affect the problem from a different angle. While I'm teaching you about literacy and numeracy, then I can introduce the ideas of morality. I can introduce the ideas of behavior, of values, of standards. Therefore, because 1 + 1 is 2, that's just how that's a fact of life. So therefore, if I'm teaching you about numbers, I can also teach you about the fact of life. There are some things, and sometimes you might want to do your own thing. We trying to get to 2, but you say 1 + 0. But 1 + 0 don't get you to 2. No matter how much you put the 2 there, that's gonna be incorrect. So you can't do what you want to do in life. You have to follow the paths that are there. And so when we use these literacy and numeracy centers, then we can affect behavior in an indirect way. The urban renewal bonds are great, but what if we attach literacy and numeracy to being able to participate in those bonds? The books and uniforms that we purchased at the beginning of the school year and part in that typographical error there are helpful. But what if we began purchasing textbooks and workbooks? So that at the end, because you know what happens? You buy a bunch of black and white books, you give them their uniforms, you get their hair cut, and you feel good. And then they go to school, and the teacher has to struggle for the year because they don't have textbooks, they don't have workbooks. And the teacher has to find or create this material, which takes time and energy, which could have been used to her creativity. The school then oftentimes have to reproduce these by photocopying, which takes money away from the possibility of innovating and being creative. And so here it is now, we come back to how we using these resources. That's why I say it's not always, especially in the Bahamian context, the idea that we don't have resources, you know. It's more so how we using these resources. We have to rethink them now and bring them into the 21st century. So talking about 21st century, workbooks and textbooks might be a thing of the past. How about paying for a school to access some learning app? You see, we are already using some of the elements of Ubuntu, but they need to be targeted towards the desired goal so that we can achieve even greater efficacy and get to the goals that we need to get to even quicker. So we got Ubuntu to break the silence. And we're coming down to the end now. How do we do this? One, remember that you are not working alone. If we operate together, no matter what issue we're facing with, like we aren't working alone, like we are part of a team, even if it's just you and your office alone, but you understand that there are other people who are facing this challenge too and may need some assistance or working alone. If we were to generate the information that would help in addressing the concern and be willing to share that information, you might, there might be no need for that information, you know. Just like I meet a student and I recognize a certain behavior, I could take note of that, put that on that student file. And when that student ends up in court, that could be the determining factor between what type of judgment that or sentencing that student get for whatever they have done. So remember that we aren't working alone. That's Ubuntu. I am because we are. Then create opportunities for collaboration. And this is why I was excited to that I was invited to participate in this. And thanks again, Troy, because what you find, as I would have said, students are already guided in what to do at Shaw before they even come in. The people who we're targeting to try and help, they communicate with each other. When they got to go to court, they say, "Oh, what judge you get?" And they tell them how to act with that judge. When they say, "Oh, which officer in charge of your case?" They talk to each other. "Oh, that's so and so. You got to do this. You got to do that." So they are working together. They working together, but we aren't. And we're wondering why we're losing the battle. Any team that works together, no matter how talented the other team is, or how lack of talent that team is that working together, once you working together, you could beat a team that have all the talent in the world, but can't work together. Collaboration is very important. And what team are we on? I like to call it Team Bahamas. You know, that's the team that we on. All of us that are working towards the betterment of the Bahamas are on Team Bahamas. Third, we have to respect the role that others play. Not because someone is in an NGO that you don't know about and they come and offer assistance, meaning that you could just dismiss them because they don't look like they have money, or they don't come with a title of doctor, or they ain't come in a nice fancy suit. Respect the role that others could play, because sometimes a man who's dragging his slippers could get through to a person who need our help more so than a man who's driving a Mercedes Benz. Because the person will look at the Mercedes Benz and say, he don't know my story. but they look at this person who dragging the slippers. And so we have to respect the role that others play. All stakeholders in this, and that's the whole community. All stakeholders are important. And so we can't discount the role that anyone plays. Silos can give us a false sense of importance. This is my area. I am the chief of police. And so them teachers can't tell me nothing. I am the educator extraordinaire. And so when the police come here, they can't tell me about how to get through to these students. I am the leader of a church or a civic organization. And I know, and them police joking and them teachers, they joking. That sort of thinking where we don't respect the role that others play. See, respecting my role doesn't mean patting me on the back when I do good, you know. Respecting my role means acknowledging that I have put effort, acknowledging that I am there. There may be some things that I need to do. If you respect me first, I would listen to you much more than if you don't respect me. 4, always respect your client. And I like to use that word client because even the offender is a client. When a student gets sent to program shore, he's not an offender. He's not a bad boy. He's a client. When the police has to go and pick up somebody, guess what? Even though he in cuff, he's a client. He's a client of your services. When he got to go to prison, he's a client. He's a client of the service that we are offering. When we offer respect to our clients, and I got to tell you, a lot of the problems that we're facing now is because our default that we operate on as Bahamians is that we don't have to respect everyone. We don't have to respect those who don't have titles. If you don't come from a certain area, we don't have to respect you. If you don't have more than I have, we don't have to respect you. Remember I said energy? This is an energy that we give off to people without even knowing it. And someone who can't read actually operates on energy more than they operate on words. And so you come to help them, but you're giving them that kind of energy that doesn't involve respect. People know disrespect. If they recognize it, no matter what gift you come to give them, they're not going to deal with it. So you give somebody who respects themselves a dirty bag full with $1 million. Guess what? They might never know what in the inside of that bag. Because as soon as you give it to them, you know what they can do? Especially a lot of ditzy uptown women. They can hold their nose, pull our bag like that, go to the nearest garbage and drop it in. $1 million, drop in the garbage. Just as easy as that. Because they felt you giving them that bag was a disrespect. So they even didn't open it to see what's in it. And when we try to help our clients, if the first thing that we give them is disrespect or lack of respect, then they will not open the bag to see what we have inside of it. And therefore, we have zero efficacy. And finally, remember that the ultimate goal is to bring healing to our community, not fix it. When we think of fixing things, it takes us back to individualism. I have the power and I have the tools and I could fix this, as opposed to I want to be a part of this healing process. I want to be a part, and a lot of times, you know, organizations come in and they go into communities and they try to help and they get very frustrated very easily. I worked in the Indaba project for over 15, almost 20 years. And I've seen organizations come and go, and people always get, oh, these people ain't respecting what I do. They ain't respecting what I do. That perspective is because you're coming from a very egotistical place where you think that you have the power and the community needs what you have. as opposed to you can contribute. The community has tools itself already. You just have a role to play in enhancing that and improving on that so that you could bring healing. You have to include yourself in the process. And when you use the vernacular of healing, language is very, very, very important to our thinking and to our actions. So when we think about we're bringing healing, when the police go into a community and the people rowing, you're going to bring healing. When the student is carrying out antisocial behavior in school and you are the administrator, you're bringing healing. Healing for that individual is very different from fixing that individual. Think about it. And I see a principal is on here too. You know, Mr. Principal, imagine the two students just finished fighting. One of the students is somebody who has been fighting a lot. You go into the meeting to deal with them, and your mentality is, let me fix this. There's certain actions you're gonna do when you say, let me fix this. I got fixie business right now for him. As opposed to when you say, how could I bring some healing to this situation? Even if you're mad. Mother's sick, man. You again? I wonder how I could bring some healing to this. Language, the language we use is very important for how we're going to address the situation. And so if we want to use Ubuntu to break the silos, we have to remember that the ultimate goal in everything is to bring healing. So with Ubuntu, this is where we start off, with these images filled with conflict. And this is where the world and our community, because we like to beat up ourselves in the Bahamas, but if you watch world news, boy, thank God for the Bahamas. But we still have our issues where there's a lot of conflict, and especially during the pandemic and with the economy going down, there will be even more conflict and people will be tense. And so this is where we are now. But with Ubuntu, we can take ourselves to here, where the institutions are welcome into the community, where we have partnerships that bring about change. Look at the young lady, not the one who was playing with the officer, the one behind her. From that little bit that you see of her, you can see that she's smiling and she's glowing. That now is an impression that that officer is making on her that other officers will benefit from down the road. And so institutions have a role to play in opening up the door by the use institutionally implementing Ubuntu. And let me put in a plug for myself here. If you guys need some help on how to implement it institutionally, I will avail myself. Yes, but when we do that and apply it institutionally, this is where we end up, where we have much stronger communities. This doesn't suggest that we won't have problems. Problems are there to help us get stronger. They make us weaker when we tackle them by ourselves. We get stronger when we tackle them together. This concept of Ubuntu that I've been promoting here this morning has so many uses. It was used in South Africa for restorative justice. It's used in Canada, as a matter of fact. Also, they call it restorative justice. It's a new thing. I'm sure those in law enforcement would have heard about it. Even the UN is talking about this concept now. And it started, everybody saw how it worked from South Africa. And it started from there. We too are African people, you know, and we have to not be afraid to use those principles that worked for our ancestors and put them in place now, because what we have been using isn't working. And so we have to be open to using new ideas, new tools, new concepts. And this one isn't so new. It's 2,000 years old. It's new to us because our mind was closed to it. But with Ubuntu, there's no limit to what we can do. We can use it in social work, in education. There's no aspect of our life where Ubuntu is not applicable. So thank you all for listening. And I trust that you were been touched by my message and can apply it in your own personal lives and institutions. And that we will have more of these sessions where we could work together, share information, and live out that spirit of Ubuntu. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Ian. Ian is so full, and he even half empty with the information he shared with us today. Ubuntu is needed. And when we talk about restorative justice, and I just love the concept, I just love the ideology, I just love it, because we are now moving into that phase in the Bahamas, government moving towards legislation with the parole system, and they're looking at implementing restorative justice in the programming for the clients coming out of the correctional system. I was going to say the offender, but because we talking about Ubuntu, I'm going to use the clients coming out of BDocs. So it was really timely. Let me read some of the information in the chat line from Christopher stated. So true. The me thinking, Christopher Trinabo is from Trinidad and Tobago. Me thinking and versus we thinking is a legacy of colonialism. It shapes the view and perspective of leadership management and shape how policy is developed and implemented in top-down manner. Also, he stated that there's a systemic change can be sustained by, there's no systemic change can be sustained by exclusionary approaches. And then we have Linda Wallace. You know, Linda Wallace is my sorority sister, and also she's a teacher, and she is from Genesis Warhawks too. Okay, preach in, having resources are key to student success. Ellen Jordan, wow, very informative and impressive. Terry Ann Walker, great presentation, very informative. I like this restorative justice. Great job, Ian. And Dwayne Higgins, great job. Eunice Roll from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Wow, this was a great presentation, Mr. Ian Maura. Thank you, sir. And the beautiful thing I must say to all of you, Kim Ramin from Ministry of Education, great job, Mr. Maura. So thank you very much, Ian. I really appreciate it. And Ian was one of the persons that actually assisted me in what to do and how to go about actually doing this symposium. So, you know, Ian and I go a long way back, and we had some, you know, disagreements on concepts and how to do things, but I always like the viewpoint, and he always take it from a different perspective, and he always bring in good information that can be useful, good insight. And so I am really humble and I'm really thankful for your presentation. And Ian, you need to find time for tomorrow evening to be on that panel tomorrow afternoon, because you have a lot to offer, and we have to get you out there to have it. Thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you.